The film opens a while after the occasions in the primary Iron Man film. We are acquainted with a man named Ivan Vanko. Ivan's dad Anton is gradually biting the dust and telling Ivan his last wishes. Ivan figures he ought to have the notoriety that Tony Unmistakable is getting a charge out of, yet Anton tells him to disregard that trash. All Anton can give Ivan is his insight. Ivan takes a diagram that has his dad's name on it, and furthermore the name of Howard Distinct, Tony Unmistakable's dad. Ivan then starts reproducing the circular segment reactor and starts assembling his own weaponized suit. Tony Unmistakable has turned into a boss for world harmony because of the Iron Man suit, and has essentially tackled the issue of world harmony, or so he guarantees. A half year after the finish of the primary film, Tony Distinct has utilized his Iron Man shield to achieve an arranged truce between the significant superpowers of the world, and his gigantic fame with the overall population is possibly promoted when he satisfies his dad's fantasy by returning the obvious exhibition in Sovereign's New York, to grandstand every one of the most recent developments that will help the world. Tony satisfies this fantasy by flying into the exhibition in full Iron Man formal attire, and making an ostentatious access to turn into the new image of world harmony. Behind the stage, following his location, Tony does a fast trial of his blood. The palladium he uses to drive his chest curve reactor is gradually harming his body. After the occasion, Tony and Cheerful are leaving when they are moved toward by a lady who hands Tony a summon, bringing him to a Senate Military Council hearing. Tony and Cheerful choose to go on a street outing to Washington, D.C. in Tony's new Audi R8. The following morning, during the Senate hearing, Tony's typical kind of humor turns into the focal point of consideration while totally disregarding the way that the public authority has characterized the Iron Man covering as a weapon. Colonel Rhodes presents the examination concerning the occasions encompassing Iron Man's creation. However, Congressperson Harsh, the panel administrator, takes his comments inappropriately. With Justin Sledge of Mallet Enterprises present, Tony gives a counter appearance that he is Iron Man and won't leave behind his defensive layer, comparing giving himself over as being commensurate to obligated bondage, and continues to hack the panel's PCs to show that different endeavors at replicating Tony's suit, from Iran, North Korea, and even Mallet itself, are finished disappointments. North Korea's is unbalanced and falls effectively, Iran's collides with the ground and detonates, while Sledge's suit pivots 180 degrees at the midsection and cuts off its pilot's spine. With his normal strut, Tony actually will not turn over the Iron Man defensive layer to the public authority and leaves the meeting. Back at home, Tony is on Jarvis breaking down the most recent models and improvements for the Iron Man suit, and Pepper enters and the two squabble over the fate of Obvious Enterprises. Tony has let Pepper know that he's getting more cash off the organization's normal stock than he could possibly do as president. He chooses he's had enough of being the chief and needs to zero in exclusively on creating Iron Man. He chooses to designate Pepper as the new president, leaving her paralyzed. The following day an exquisite legal official public enters to have Tony formally give the organization up to Pepper. Tony is going through battling preparing with Blissful and plays out an unlawful continue on him, getting it mistaken for MMA. The legal official's name is Natalie Rushman, and he is cheerful give her a boxing example, and keeping in mind that looking into her profile, Natalie plays out a technical knockout on Blissful, utilizing a takedown that shows there's something else to her besides there shows up. Tony heads to Monaco for some truly necessary R&R. At a gathering before the Monaco 500, where Unmistakable Enterprises is supporting a driver and has entered an Equation 1 racer, Tony is welcomed by his #1 Vanity Fair columnist Christine Everhart, who needs Pepper for the front of the following issue, which will present her as the new Distinct Business's CEO. Justin Sledge likewise is there. They likewise welcome Tesla Engine's president Elon Musk, who needs a board at the Unmistakable exhibition to grandstand his most recent development. Tony takes one more perusing of his blood, finding that the palladium harming has expanded. Tony concludes that he will be driving the Distinct Enterprises vehicle rather than the driver that was pre-chosen. Obvious beginnings the race, however unbeknownst to him, Ivan Vanko has gone along with one of the race's pit teams. Under his leap suit, Vanko wears a tackle with two huge energy whips controlled by the curve reactor he'd worked after his dad passed on. Vanko utilizes the whips to cut one vehicle 50, cause a gigantic accident and ambushes Tony. As Vanko is destroying devastation on the track, Blissful and Pepper race to convey the attaché Cheerful conveys with him to Tony. Vanko utilizes his electric whips on the Rolls-Royce apparition that Cheerful and Pepper are in, and after continued smashing endeavors, Pepper at last figures out how to give Tony the folder case. Tony enacts the case, which is a convenient form of the Iron Man reinforcement. After an incensed fight, Tony can overcome Vanko by physically taking out the circular segment reactor battery that drives his whips, pounding it after he has Jarvis break down it. The police snatch Vanko and arrest him, the resistant Vanko shouting at Tony, "You lose." The whole group is paralyzed at what they've recently seen. Justin Mallet, in any case, accepts that Vanko can be put to all the more likely use. Distinct gets a confidential gathering with Vanko and Care. Vanko asks Tony what it seems like to be a dead man and that palladium in the chest is an extremely difficult method for dying. Obvious lets Vanko know that makes two of them. Afterward, Sledge breaks Vanko out. He slips Vanko a feast comprising of chicken and pureed potatoes alongside a note telling him to partake in the potatoes. Vanko and another detainee are given outfits with a similar ID. Vanko promptly kills the detainee as well as a watchman on out the entryway, and sets the touchy gadget contained in the potatoes, and as he makes his departure, he's stowed by two Mallet agents and removed. Hammer realizes Vanko needs his assets to outperform Tony, and Vanko obliges. Hammer then enlists Vanko to assemble defensively covered suits in light of existing plans. Vanko tells Mallet they are doing everything wrong. He likewise demands that Mallet recover his pet cockatoo from his home in Russia. On the plane back home, Tony and Pepper are watching the consequence of the occasions that occurred and are watching a fairly furious Representative Harsh empty his disappointments with Tony on the O'Reilly element. Harsh is saying that Tony Distinct deceived the Senate Military Advisory Group, and that he's at risk for being captured on crime prevarication charges. Obvious had let the Senate know that different nations, as well as Mallet businesses, were 20 years from having anything that in any way looked like Iron Man, but Vanko shocked everybody by making a functioning duplicate of the Bend reactor. Tony gives Pepper a connoisseur dinner and will come clean with her, yet they have an off-kilter second as Pepper realizes that something is happening and that Tony isn't telling her every bit of relevant information. Back home, Tony is utilizing Jarvis to direct examinations concerning Ivan Vanko. He observes that Vanko's dad Anton Vanko was Howard's obvious accomplice and one of the fellow benefactors of Distinct Enterprises. Howard Distinct figured out that Vanko was scheming to offer weapons to the Soviet domain and had him captured for conspiracy and expelled to Russia, where he was detained. His child had been looking for retribution against the Distinct domain from that point onward. While sitting in one of his dragsters in his storm cellar, Tony almost falls and is found by Rhodes, who lets him know that this is definitely not a decent search for him. He shows Rhodey how the palladium is gradually harming him. Rhodes likewise lets him know that he's been fighting with the Pentagon by preventing them from coming to his Malibu house and taking his suits to be utilized for weaponized purposes. Tony plans for what he accepts will be his last birthday celebration. He inquires as to whether this were her last birthday celebration. Natalie answers that she'd do anything she desired with whoever she needed to do it with. While at the party, Tony is very inebriated while wearing the Iron Man suit and acting wildly with its weaponry. Behind the scenes, Pepper and Rhodes are examining that he's gone way crazy. Rhodes lets Pepper know that he's burnt out on managing the Pentagon and the Senate Military Council. Rhodes, at last having enough of Tony's tricks, proceeds to wear the Silver Imprint 2 suit. He then, at that point, provokes Tony to a battle, where Tony has the in-house DJ play some great Foundation tunes. The fight closes in an impasse and Rhodey takes off in the Imprint 2 defensive layer, conveying it to military specialists at Edwards Flying Corps Base. Justin Sledge is subsequently welcome to concentrate on the go for whatever he might prefer and furnishes them with cutting-edge weapons to arm it. The following day, Tony is at the well-known Los Angeles milestone donut shop Randy's Donuts, sitting in the Iron Man suit on the popular Monster Put donut. Shamed and hungover, Tony is drawn nearer by Safeguard Chief Scratch Fierceness, who tells Unmistakable that in spite of the issues he's having with the public authority and his tipsy Iron Man shenanigans, which are not worth fretting over, Rage has an issue to manage in the Southwest U.S. Tony contemplates whether anger in the Justice Fighters' drive is genuine, and Rage consoles Tony that it's genuine, and that he realized Howard Unmistakable well overall. Truth be told, Howard was one of the establishing individuals from S.H.I.E.L.D., his employer. They are joined by specialist Phil Coulson and Natalie Rushman, whose genuine name is Natasha Romanoff, a S.H.I.E.L.D. specialist established in Distinct Enterprises to screen Tony himself. A hungover Tony is paralyzed at this disclosure and flames Natalie/Natasha, however she then, at that point, lets Tony know that it's not his concern and that he's being scrutinized from S.H.I.E.L.D., and she and specialist Coulson are there to ensure Tony follows orders and doesn't mess up. Rage and Natasha both notice Tony's palladium harming. Tony answers that he's examined and tried each no component and each stage of them with no achievement. Natasha infuses Tony with a serum that eases back the side effects of his palladium harming fundamentally, giving him an opportunity to track down a substitute component to keep him alive. Meanwhile, Tony will be restricted to his Malibu home. Wrath tells Tony some more insight concerning Anton Vanko's relationship with Howard Distinct and gives Tony a chest of his dad's old curios that can ideally be utilized to track down a remedy for his condition. Tony opposes further endeavors from shield obstruction, yet Specialist Coulson consoles Tony that he's not going anyplace until Tony tracks down the responses that he's looking for about his condition. Surveying the film pulls in the chest, Distinct finds a message from his dad that drives him to the first 1974 lifelike model of the Obvious exhibition. He recovers the lifelike model from his old office, presently involved by Pepper, and attempts to accommodate with her. Truly, the lifelike model is a hidden chart for the nuclear design of another component that Howard couldn't deliver in his time, yet Tony might have the option to with his high-level information and present-day innovation. Distinct plays out an extreme modification of his home studio and hand fabricates a little atom smasher with the guide of his PC framework. JARVIS Obvious blends this new component, making another three-sided chest curve reactor that fixes his harming and is substantially more remarkable than Distinct's previous renditions. Not long before Tony finishes the molecule speed increase, Coulson lets him know that he's allowed to go and that S.H.I.E.L.D. has reassigned him to one more case in New Mexico. At Mallet Enterprises, Vanko has fundamentally changed the plan of Sledge's suits. They are presently mechanized drones. Notwithstanding what Vanko considers upgrades, Sledge is disappointed and detains Vanko in a little room with two gatekeepers while he takes the robots to the Distinct exhibition. Hammer reveals his new military robots, captained by Rhodes in a vigorously weaponized variant of the seized Imprint 2 protection. Sadly, it is before long found that Vanko has pre-modified the robots, giving himself full oversight. He likewise has control of Rhodes' new reinforcement, and Unmistakable shows up similarly as they go on the assault. As Obvious fights these remote-controlled foes and attempts to sidestep Rhodes, cheerful Hogan and Romanoff competition to Mallet's Sovereign's office to stop Vanko. At the point when they show up, they battle their direction through Sledge's safety officers. Blissful is satisfied he brought one of them down, yet is somewhat bothered when he sees that Romanoff has brought down essentially about 6 quite promptly. Vanko has previously withdrawn for the exhibition in another reinforced suit, a refreshed adaptation of the outfit he utilized when he went after Tony in Monaco. Back at the Obvious exhibition, similarly as Mallet has completed his show, the robots assault the standing room just group and they start to escape. Unmistakable and pursues the robots and connects with them while Specialist Romanoff and Pepper have Justin Sledge captured for holding on to the criminal Vanko. Natasha can give Rhodes control of his protective layer again so he and Unmistakable can battle the other robots together. The two defensively covered partners join their powers and effectively obliterate every one of the robots. Vanko then, at that point, lands nearby, wearing an incredibly refreshed defensively covered suit with further developed plasma energy whips. After a difficult fight, Distinct has a thought for he and Rhodes to utilize a stunt from their previous fight during Unmistakable's birthday celebration, terminating their energy repulsors to impact and make a similar blast with Vanko trapped in the center. The move brings Vanko down, yet Vanko's defensive layer and robots are uncovered to have been outfitted with fall-to-pieces charges. As they detonate, Unmistakable competitions to save Pepper, safeguarding her without a second to spare. In the wake of arriving on a rooftop, she stops her president position, and she at last gives Tony a kiss, to which the two of them find Rhodes sitting a couple of meters away. Tony at last comes clean with Pepper about his heart, disturbing her incredibly. Distinct advises Rhodes to leave, however Rhodes then asserts he was there first, so they ought to get their own rooftop after Obvious attempts to guard himself. At a post-op interview, Wrath illuminates Obvious that while Unmistakable is unsatisfactory for the justice fighter's drive, Safeguard needs Distinct as a specialist. Distinct settles on the condition that Congressperson Harsh by present him and Colonel Rhodes with their awards for boldness, but Representative Harsh is not exactly entertained when he gives Tony his decoration. In a post-credits scene, Safeguard Specialist Coulson is seen heading to a remote effect cavity in the New Mexico desert. He illuminates Rage via telephone that they've tracked down it. In the pit is Mjolnir, the sledge of Thor.